The Shepnaz podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shepnaz podcast. I'm Joe and I'm your host today. Each week during our Sunday worship services, we highlight a different ministry or Nazarene mission that we support. This past Sunday, we highlighted Mount Vernon Nazarene University. I had the pleasure to speak with Dr. James Smith, who currently serves as the Vice President for University Relations at MVNU. And now we'll join that conversation. Welcome, Dr. Smith. This is Dr. James Smith from MVNU. And tell us a little bit about the position that you're currently serving at MVNU.
Yeah, so I am the Vice President for University Relations. So I oversee alumni, church relations, our donor relations, basically all the external relations in addition to the marketing department.
Nice. So you get your hands to be able to reach out to all the people that associate with MVNU. Yeah. Well, I want to dive a little more into kind of what you do there and what's going on with MVNU. But before we do that, we'd like to get to know you a little bit, kind of your personal walk of faith. You know, we've always found encouraging to our listeners and our church tenders to be able to hear the testimony of those that we talk to and kind of see how they came to the position that they're in. So tell us a little bit about your coming up in the faith and how you came to Christ.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I grew up as a pastor's kid. My mom and dad met at MVNC actually when it was a 2-year college back in the day. Moved out west for youth ministry where they had my sister and I. We actually went back to Mount Vernon when they finished their degrees. So during these times, we were kind of in and out of, full-time to part-time youth ministry, really most of my upbringing. And so I don't remember not having a relationship with Christ. I've got one of those little Gideon's Bibles when I was, 5 years old, where I wrote in there that I had given my life to Christ. I feel when it really got real for me was really more during my teen years. My dad had taken a break. Back then I would say quit ministry when I was in 5th grade. Just some pain he had gone through. And so that's been a hard time for our family. We moved back to where my dad was from in Northeast Ohio. And my mom and dad got jobs. And we plugged into this amazing church called Champion Church of the Nazarene up in Warren, Ohio. And it was such a great church. My parents still loved the Lord. They just needed a break at the time. But they talk a lot about during those years how the Lord just drew me closer to Him. And, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, while they were going through kind of a time of a spiritual desert, He was pulling me in and they'd come in and I'm reading my Bible and doing all the things they taught me to do, right?
Sure.
But part of it was this incredible church, that really the entire church took care of us kids and teens. The old adopted grandparents programs. I had this woman named Dorothy. She was probably 75 years old at the time, and she, every Sunday she'd come and give me a hug, and I'd walk her to her car, and she was praying for me every day and investing in me, and Ray Knapp and Jim Morales and a lot of these similar probably types of people that have been at Shepnaz over the years, that have invested in young people like me. They are a huge part of what led me to really a pretty transformational experience in 9th grade. I was at a winter retreat for my youth group. We had an awesome youth group. No youth pastor, but about 40, 45 kids in our youth group.
Wow.
And yeah, it was incredible. And just great youth group memories. And we're at this retreat, and Doug and Debbie Boquist, actually, who are some pastors of the Nazarene Church, I'd be surprised if they never did a revival at Shepnaz back in the day. They were the speakers. And I went down to the altar, and I feel like it was the day that I just gave God everything, like that. I really see that as like a sanctification moment where I decided, you know what, I don't want you just to have like part of me. I want you to have all of me. And then I felt a call to ministry that moment. That's when I knew I was called to ministry. And And I went home and told my parents and told my pastor, and and really began to lean in on ministry that time. And so for me, that's really my spiritual journey. Incredible parents who love the Lord, an amazing church who helped me know that God loved me even through some really hard times I went through in my teen years. And then a church who pushed me just to go start ministry the moment I was called. I started a Bible study in my 9th grade year in my high school, and it's a pretty small high school, but about 30% of my high school ended up attending my Bible study by my sophomore year, and so I became a youth pastor at 14. And
yeah,
so,
right.
That'll make you grow.
Sure.
that'll push you. Yeah.
Now,
So I'd say that's a synopsis.
we kind of have a common experience in that I was in a pastor's family. I was a pastor's kid, and I wanted to just dive into that a little bit because we've got a lot of people that are very heavily involved in ministry, and you find families that have kids that are of the parents of those that are in a lot of ministry. And I was just curious, with some of the struggles that they had to face, and at one point, felt like they needed to step away and kind of get refreshed a little bit. How did they react when you were going to go right back into what they had taken a pause from?
Yeah, they were not pumped, but they were never going to dissuade me from that. My dad still had a call.
Sure.
He just, was taking a break. And what's funny about those days, Joe? Like I can remember vividly as a little 7th grade kid, walking into my parents' bedroom and say, when are you going to stop running from God's call? Like, we look back at it all the time, because I really, from the beginning, felt like our family was called to ministry.
Yeah.
So I was one of those pastor kids who grieved that loss.
Yeah.
And so my parents were not about, I'm a pretty strong personality. So my parents weren't about to dissuade me from my call,
Sure.
they knew that wouldn't go over well. And so they said, they really pushed me just to examine it, to talk to my pastor at the time. Pastor Bob Chu just passed away during COVID and was just an incredible man. Really pressed me to lean into my District NY president and talk through it with him. I was on District NY Council, and you know who that NY president was? Sam Barber.
Well, there you go.
His former pastor. And so my parents would literally, they'd take me to meet with Sam. When I began to drive, I'd go connect with him and get his advice on things. And so they didn't dissuade me, but they wanted to make sure I really examined the call.
Sure.
And made sure it was something that was true and not just something I was, feeling in a moment. So, but they also gave me opportunity just to start doing it. I mean, I led my first youth revival when I was a junior in high school.
Wow.
A church on my district asked me to come lead a youth revival for them. And I'm like, sure. So, my parents were always going to, drive me to those things and equip me to dive into ministry, and they encouraged me in that way. And honestly, it's part of what drew them back into ministry.
Sure.
I was at a District NY Council meeting. It was Sam Barber, and our impact team directors had resigned, and they were looking for a new director, and I nominated my parents. And so
that's nice.
Yep. And 6 months later, they were impact directors. A year later, they were intern pastors at a church, and they went back into ministry from there. So,
oh, wonderful. Well, it's interesting somehow, how God worked through all of that, and it's quite possible that that's what God obviously had in mind for them at that time, was to take a step back, and yet He wasn't done with them, and so. I would encourage those that are listening. Sometimes you might feel like well, that's it for me. God's done with me. I'm not going to have another opportunity, or I got burnt out, or I got hurt. And the reality is God never stops pursuing. He never stops. And so he'll come back after you, and he'll get you to be in the place that he needs you to be. Well, we're going to take it's been great hearing your personal testimony. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk a little more about kind of how your career has developed and what's going on with MVNU. Coming November 4th is a fall movie night. Bring the whole family for bonfires with hot dogs, s'mores, hay rides, and an outdoor family-friendly movie. Don't forget your blankets or lawn chairs. Invite your friends and neighbors to join us. That's November the 4th at 4 p.m. outside at our Gahanna campus. You can find out about all our upcoming events at shepnaz.org/calendar. All right, well, we're back, and we've been talking to Dr. James Smith from Mount Vernon Nazarene University, and we got to hear a little bit about his personal testimony. And now we're going to get a little more into kind of his career and things that are going on at Mount Vernon and opportunities that are available there. So, Dr. James, would you tell us a little bit about how it came to be that you got to be an administrator at Mount Vernon?
Yes, it is a circuitous path. It was not something that I designed, but I do feel like it's where the Lord, slowly led me. So I was my bachelor's degree was in youth ministry, and I have a master's in educational ministry. And I really thought I'd be a youth pastor my entire life. That was really what, where I thought I was headed. And I had so many great youth minister mentors. Shepherd has a long and rich history. And so I think it overlaps with lots of people like myself throughout the Nazarene Church,
Sure.
And as I look back, some of my influences, actually my first youth ministry opportunity, in college was when Rob Paw, your current pastor, was the youth pastor at Newark Naz.
Yes.
And he was leaving. And so he had met me through Mount Vernon when I was a student there. And he suggested to them, why don't you bring this kid in as our interim youth pastor? And so I came in for like 2 or 3 months and filled in after Paul left to go to, I believe, Grove City at the time. And so Rob believing me in that way was incredible. The experience I had going to Newark Naz, those, last 3 months, I think, of one of my years, sophomore, junior year, were really formative. Then my first youth ministry, Scott Jones was the district NYI president.
Wow, there's a lot of tie-in there.
It is. And he, as a 22-year-old, put me in charge of a mission trip for the district, brought 50 people to Mexico. And they all survived. Only one person came back with, 40 stitches. So I count that as a victory for a 22-year-old.
Sure.
But, really, I feel like a lot of what led me to where I'm at are people like this. All these people who are part of this incredible Nazarene family, a lot who I met through my time at MVNU, who invested in me, and then at different times, knocked on my door, picked up the phone, and asked me if I'd be interested in something new. And that's what happened with MVNU. I had been youth pastoring. We were planting a church at the time with our district in Northwest Ohio. And one of my friends told me the director of admissions job was open to MVNU. And my wife had been wanting, and my wife and I, Kelly, we've been wanting to get into, Christian college, ministry, basically, in some way. We thought it'd be a chaplaincy or student life or something like that. But man, the Lord just opened the doors. And for some reason, they hired, this 29-year-old youth pastor as director of admissions. And I came over, and we had a lot of early success. And it opened a door for me to become an assistant vice president, an associate vice president, and then eventually the vice president of enrollment and marketing. And the whole time I've been teaching youth ministry, until I became a vice president. I remained engaged in that work. The last 10 years, Joe, I have been the East Central Field Youth Coordinator for Nazarene Youth International, which essentially means I've been in charge of youth ministry for Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky,
Wow.
for the church. And so that's been incredible to be at MVNU, helping remind our churches of the connection that MVNU is an educational arm of the church. And that as part of my role there, it was really a seamless role for me to be able to help cast vision and invest in youth leaders and invest in teenagers, over these past 10 years, and that role I was serving here. So that's kind of what led me to this place. It's really my call. Like, for me, God called me to ministry, and MVNU is the educational arm of the Church of the Nazarene. It's not a separate, entity. It is part of what we do. From the very beginning, the Nazarene Church has integrated education, missions. These are kind of like two of our it's part of our lifeblood, right?
Sure.
It's part of our DNA, our identity. And so for me, I just see myself as fulfilling my call through this place here. So yeah.
Well, and I see how it serves such a critical role, especially with the college age, because so many times that's when we see young people walking away from their faith. They may have grown up in the church and they were in youth group during high school, and then they run off to college, and all of those kind of habits and routines of being involved in the church and being around influences that have, Christian worldview, some of that goes away if they're not in an intentionally Christian environment. And then, unfortunately, if we lose them, oftentimes we don't regain them until they've already started to establish a life and realize things aren't going the way they want them to go, and then they come back to try to make some sort of course correction and seek the Lord. So in that way, right. I think MVNU really does create a bridge to keep our youth connected through the college age. And as far as being an attractive force for the church as a whole and even the denomination, my personal story echoes that. I grew up in the church, and much like you had kind of described with your parents, there was a time in my life when I was going through some church hurts, and it was actually when my wife and I went back to college. We had started at Ohio State. We got married, started having kids, didn't finish school. And about that time is when MVNU was really in full force with what they were calling at that time the Excel program. And we ended up coming back to MVNU to finish our degrees. And when we did, that was actually my first exposure to the Nazarene Church. And it wasn't an immediate thing. Like I didn't immediately start going to a Nazarene church just because I had attended MVNU, but we had a really great experience there. And we were able to talk to professors and pastors there that made us feel good about the Church of the Nazarene. And so when there was a time in our life when we decided to make a change where like, hey, we really need to plug in somewhere where we feel like we're not going to be hurt, where we can thrive in our Christian faith and we can raise our kids. That was when we said, okay, let's check out this church, and it was a Nazarene church. And so, what you're saying does really have impact, and it really does change people's lives. So with that, let's talk a little bit about what is going on at MVNU right now. Do we have? I believe we do have a new president. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yes, we do. Dr. Carson Castleman actually started this past week, technically on Sunday. October 1st was his first day, but October 2nd, is real. We were able to welcome him into chapel, and it was a really special time. We invited all the faculty and staff to come that day to try to close all the offices and join us so we could lay hands on him and begin in that special way. And it was such a meaningful service and time, beginning his time here. Dr. Carson Castleman actually began his career at MVNU. So he's not an alum, but it feels like he is. A lot of people who have been around the school would feel like Dr. Carson is an alum because he was here from 1997 till I think about '03. He was in admissions, and then he moved into my world, into the fundraising world. He was a development officer here, and then he's been at Indiana Wesleyan for about 20 years in various roles, but most significantly leading programs similar to what you attended at MVNU, the Excel program now called MVNU Online here. He was leading all the student services for Indiana Wesleyan's program, which is a very enormous, far-reaching program. So he has a rich career in higher education that began here, but he has accomplished so much through his time at Indiana Wesleyan, which we really consider to be a sister school. We have strong relationships with them.
Sure.
But we're glad to take Dr. Carson from him and bring him back to Mount Vernon.
We consider that a win.
He's ready to go.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I saw actually some of the social media, and it looked like it was a wonderful service with the laying on of hands and people being involved in worship and just trying to lift him up to the Lord for this next chapter at MVNU.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit. Give us the 1 minute commercial of the best things that are happening in MVNU. And if I'm thinking about going to college, why in the world should I go to that university?
Oh boy, 1 minute.
Well, you can take a couple if you'd like.
There's so much good stuff happening right now, Joe. We just recently announced we're receiving the third largest gift in our history. It'll be over $4 million. And it's for a new HW hub, which is named after a gentleman named Hunter Wright, who recently passed away, but was part of helping launch our engineering program. And this is going to be an expansion of the Stephen Neese Center for Engineering. But what it is it's an enormous space for basically innovation in the areas of engineering and computer science. So computer science will be moving downtown next to our engineering building with just this cutting edge space. Part of the gift is $1.5 billion of new engineering and computer science equipment. So imagine what that means. That's more than 5xing the amount of equipment we currently have for the engineering program. And so we cannot wait. That'll open in the fall of 2025, and we'll bring our computer science and engineering programs to a whole new level. So we offer mechanical, electrical, and computer engineering. And then we offer a couple different tracks within the computer science program. So those are incredible programs. We've had a surge of ministry majors lately. We had such a huge class of ministry majors come in this year. And we are really encouraging call, helping remind students that God is still calling people to ministry and that we are the place they need to come to get that training. And so we have a very strong freshman class, including my own daughter. And Joe, I know you can attest to this program because Caleb, your son, came through it. Yes. I got to teach Caleb in a class or two. And so, there's so many good things. We just renovated the rec. It's a new student center right when you walk into the Heisen campus center. There's this new space called the rec that is incredible for students. We have a lot of renovated or new spaces over the last 5 to 10 years that have created a very enriching student experience with a lot of places to be able to connect with one another and study in the kind of spaces students are drawn to study in. But the faculty we have been drawing are incredible. It's hard for me to pick out just a discipline and brag on that faculty, because I feel like our faculty we have a deep bench, if you know what I mean. Like,
Sure.
In many different programs, we have people that, if you go on our website and check out the faculty who will be teaching you, I think you'll be impressed. I want to emphasize, we've been known for education for a long time, and that program is so strong. Pre-med, nursing, these are some staples of ours that, people throughout the years would just rave about us throughout the state. And so we continue to excel in those programs, and yet we continue to create new programs like speech language pathology, where we're quickly becoming competitive, I think aspirational for other schools.
Wonderful. I mean, so and truthfully, I can attest. I have had several of my children. In fact, all of my children have attended MVNU,
Yep.
and they've had great experiences there, and that was following both Susan and I having great experiences there. We'll give a shout out to a couple of our Shepherd students right now. Brett Dillinger, who was interning with us over the summer and got to preach a couple times and did a great job. And someone that I know that you probably know fairly personally is Nasir Cousin, who is also a great guy, and he grew up in the children's ministry of Shepherd under Julie Stevens and Ashley Kuhn, and he's just been able to excel in that area as well. So, Joe,
do you know the connection with Nasir and me?
Well, actually, I do, but I was going to wait to see if you were going to say it instead of me bringing it up.
Yes. So my daughter and Nasir have been dating since April, and so connection to Shepnaz now. I wasn't thinking about, but Nasir has become, good friends with our family, of course, and it's been incredible to watch him grow and spend a lot more time with him. Our family is very close, and so that's my oldest daughter, and it's been fun, just seeing what it looks like for her to be in college and have a boyfriend and a guy who we so much. And when your kid's growing up, you're always like, you just want them to date people who love Jesus and help them fall deeper in love with Jesus. And watching the two of them do devotions and debate theology warms my heart.
Yeah, so, he's a great guy.
He's a great kid. Joe, I think what you just said, I want to emphasize the number one reason anyone from Shepnaz or anyone else should send their students to MVNU is because we center faith in everything we do. That we are first and foremost an institution of Christian, higher education. And so faith is integrated in and outside the classroom. Everywhere we go, every faculty and staff member we hire has signed a covenant, saying that they have accepted Christ as their Savior and that this is part of the ministry of what they do with their life. And so that is first and foremost. And you've seen that benefit in your own kids. Mm-hmm. Gehenna, Shepnaz is one of our top 10 sending churches of all time of students. And so we are grateful for this ongoing partnership with your church. We could name students forever. My best friend married a Shepnaz girl, Carrie Presley. Mm-hmm. And so, over the years, Shepnaz has, I think, seen that benefit of kids coming here and seeing them go out and do incredible things as they integrate their faith in whatever profession they go into. So thank you for that partnership. But I also think that is core to why anyone should consider us in the future. We are a good partner to continue the good work your church and your families have done in the life of their kids.
Amen. I appreciate that, and it's been a great relationship both ways. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. Actually, if you've been wondering this whole time, Dr. James is actually in his car right now, and he's been talking to us as he's traveling from location to location. And he was gracious enough to give us a little bit of time today so that we could talk and share about what's going on at Mount Vernon. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you have been encouraged to hear all the great things that are going on at MVNU. We ask that you pray for MVNU as they too are helping people take their next step toward Jesus. If you'd like to reach out to us, we welcome your email to podcast@shepnaz.org. We encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find out more about Shepherd on our website at shepnaz.org. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.